some ways that shows how jazz is part of the fabric of America. We've been talking also all week about race and how race is the fabric of bringing together jazz and then bringing America into jazz. And we talk about how race is the beginning strand of jazz. In some ways, it starts with the emancipation in the 1870s, 1880s, as the plantation freed slaves come into the cities and bring with them some of the music. And maybe if you could start there, help me out a little bit. I mean, there are great songs from the plantation blues, like Motherless Child. And when you think about Motherless Child, it's because somebody had been sold down the river and left it and been split up as a family. And so it's that type of blues that people bring at the very beginning. Do you want to explain that?
And I want to make also the observation that the word plantation was the English system, how they dealt with the Irish. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that the English had a plantation system to exploit the labor of the Irish. It came to America, it was called plantations. And when people in the 19th century heard the spirituals, they said they sound just like Irish folk songs. So it's important to understand that the root of Afro-American music and the root of all American music is Anglo-Celtic music. The harmonic roots and the folk songs, the use of the sixth, and all the things that we're going to hear in Motherless Child that Jay Batt is going to play. That has its, as a matter of fact, St. James Infirmary, which is a New Orleans song.
Motherless Child and St. James Infirmary.
You hear a lot of the pentatonic scale in it.
Why?
The melodic root of it is very pentatonic based, which is also from Africa, you know, the pentatonic scale. Like if you play, you hear it in a lot of folk music.
It's a lot of Eastern music.
So it's Celtic, Eastern, folk, and then the blues of the plantation. And then they get to New Orleans and there's Congo Square. And then how do you get to syncopation in Congo Square?
Okay, we have a kind of ironic situation. Many times if we just take, when the founding fathers, when they were framing the Constitution and the Constitutional Congress, you have a lot of things that are not congruent. Like the North is the reason that the slaves were considered 3/5 a person, not the South. And because they didn't want the South to have those votes. So you have a lot of things that Congo Square came about because New Orleans was controlled by the French, and the French let slaves play drums. But the Spanish also controlled New Orleans for a brief period of time, and they were the most lenient. If you could survive them, they didn't kill you. You have many more rights under the Spanish than any other colonial. So the New Orleans style, New Orleans people were had much more freedom, and they were much more integrated. After the Louisiana Purchase, 1804, from that point till really the 1870s, it was a constant American attempt to stop slaves from playing, to get rid of Congo Square, to make them be like the rest of the slaves who were more English and more Protestant. So they had to deal with another type of environment. So in a strange way, in New Orleans, we had all of this freedom due to the French and the Spanish. We were in America, which was the land of freedom, with the Mississippi Basin, the bottom of the mouth of the Mississippi River. And finally, the Congo Square stopped because the militia started to drill in the square and the slave stop. But before that point, on a Sunday, people had a chance to sell goods, something slaves didn't have a chance to do in the rest of America. And they could dance and play African music. And from that comes all of the music that we hear that has drums. That's why New Orleans has been kind of the fount of all the things from rock and roll to whatever style of music you like, funk, rap. Anything that has drums and bass together comes from Congo Square and that experience. I'm gonna tap out how that became a swing rhythm. Okay, I'm gonna show you how the evolution of that rhythm in America, it leaned more toward the four. He's just laughing because I was making up stuff on it. Okay, it comes from a, now interesting, it's like an Irish jig, okay. That's the American swing pattern, shuffle.
Yeah. Marches.
John talked about marches, and that's when all these Spanish-American war veterans are coming back and hocking their horns in New Orleans. The march is in 2/4 time, so how does that play into the syncopation and the mix?
Well, when you get into New Orleans music, they do the big four. And that's the accent of the fourth beat, where marches are very straight. The tuba and the bass drum are together. Boom, 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 boom.
I'm glad they were part in this time. Go ahead.
So then what happens in New Orleans music from the African influence of Congo Square is they start adding more syncopation based on that 6/8 rhythm that we.
So it's already a pretty amazing racial mix, which is the New Orleans of French Creole orchestras, the people returning back with the marching bands and stuff. Who brings it together? Is it Buddy Bolden, or I mean, you're the person who understands Buddy Bolden better than anybody.
He knows about it. Buddy Bolden brought it. Interestingly enough, Buddy Bolden and the jazz musicians came in the period after Reconstruction. Now, this is the same period in New Orleans where we began instructing Confederate statues and doing all of these things to say, okay, we are fully America now, and this is the place we want y'all to have. Buddy Bolden, Jelly Roll Martin, the early jazz musicians very consciously counterstated that. At that time, of course, they couldn't say anything if they wanted to live. They made the intelligent choice. They were very quiet from a political standpoint, but socially, they made their music a certain way, and their music celebrated freedom, and their music celebrated the exact freedoms that we enjoy and that we're celebrating here today. So what they did was they took the traditional marching band form that you would hear Philip Sousa's band, the most famous band in the land and the greatest band. That organization, the clarinet and the high register, the trumpet, noble trumpet playing the melody where it should be. The trombone down there sliding around somewhere. We never know what they're doing. And the bass and the drums playing their part. They changed the bass and the drum part the way John demonstrated. Instead of being on the downbeat, they placed the accent on the offbeat. So instead of going boom, 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 boom. I didn't like Louis Armstrong. Like many people of my age coming up after the Civil Rights Movement, we had our afros, our platform shoes, we were listening to Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye, and somebody with a handkerchief singing Hello Dolly. We didn't want to hear about that. So if you were not extremely sophisticated in your understanding of American history, you did not want to hear. My father would always say, man, you have to check Pops out. And I was like, man, I don't want Pops, And in New Orleans, too, it's so much what we call Uncle Tommen goes on. It's so much of that goes on, playing Dixie, shuffling. And in my time, I hated that with an unbelievable passion when I was growing up. There's no way for me to even express the type of anger and hatred I had toward that type of behavior. So I could not appreciate Armstrong. But when I left New Orleans and I was in New York at that time, my father sent me a tape. Then it was a cassette tape. And it was Louis Armstrong playing Jubilee. He said, man, why don't you learn one of these pop solos? So I put it on. It sounded easy. It was on Louis Armstrong playing Jubilee. I thought, man, this is easy. I'm used to playing all these fast solos, Freddie Hubbard, Dizzy Gillespie. So I put it on. I started to work on it. Man, I could not play this solo at all. Just the endurance of Louis Armstrong. He never stopped playing. He was always up around high B's. And when we got to the final chorus, I called my father. I said, man, I didn't understand about Pops. He just started laughing. He said, that's right. And Louis Armstrong I was once in Argentina with some people, and a song came on the record of Louis Armstrong playing. He didn't know who it was, and he said, "Man, who is this trumpet player? They play tango better than anybody who plays tango." He was a tango musician. He plays better than a tango musician. Who is that? I said, Louis Armstrong.
I'm going to throw you a curve.
Well, I was speaking more of two forms of music. One form is the form that the country had the greatest appetite for, and still does, which is the minstrel show. The more of a fool a black person could be, the more ignorance could be ascribed to us, the more we could be shown as debased, the more we could be dehumanized, the greater the audience and the most amount of money. That still continues with rap music. There's a excellent rap film made by a guy named Hunt. I'm sorry, Brother Hunt, I forget your first name. I love you, though. And in that, one of the rappers observes, yeah, when I'm just rapping, I'm not getting the suburbs and I'm not making those. But as soon as I start the N-word and I start all this killing and murdering, man, I'm getting. This is where the bread is coming in. So we still remain a country enamored with the minstrel show. We had a good 100-something years of it. If we take when it first started with Daddy Rice in the 1830-something, early 1840s, in the Christie minstrels and all the different minstrels, to the end of the Amos and Andy radio show. We had a good 100 years of it, and then it came back. So and then there's always that other strain, which is the Fisk Jubilee singers, Buddy Bolden, Duke Ellington, the strain of jazz, which is always trying to counterstate. Now, another thing I want to say about race relations in America is never black versus white. It's always black and white versus white. You could go all the way back to the Underground Railroad. It was never a black enterprise versus a white, because the actual concept of blackness itself is not real. It's something that exists in this country only for that group of people who are deemed to be black, to be the other and always be the counterbalance to freedom. Well, how do we know we have freedom? Because y'all don't have it. So in our country, the greatest challenge is for all of us to be together in spite of our history. And not only in spite of it, but because of our history. Because our history has both strains, a strain of terrible and ignorant things and a strain of wonderful things. So the question of our symbols is always important, because your symbols will determine what aspect of your personality do you choose to embody. And it's also a personal struggle that we all have. We all are capable of doing little things. But the thing we ask ourselves every day is, how can I not do these little things and do these other big things? But we're all capable of it. And so too are we capable as a nation of doing the smallest thing. So how do we do the biggest thing? And when all of our symbols are a celebration of smallness, it will lead us to doing things that are small. When our symbols are big, they will lead us to big things. And jazz has always been
You talked about the two different ways we do jazz. It leads to what? Bebop and swing. Do you want to give us some example of that? And it's interesting because Gershwin, a Jewish immigrant to America, right? All of a sudden, you see more strands coming in to what we call our American music that we invented. Lady Be Good.
E flat.
Swing to bebop.
Well, swing music was based in big band traditions. So with swing, you had large ensembles, and the difference with bebop is it focused more on the improvisation of the soloists in a small group context. So now, geniuses like Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, they come up with this concept of taking American popular song, and they're listening to classical music, European classical music, and taking harmonic concepts from there, taking music from Stravinsky, all types of stuff, and putting it into the American popular song, and figuring out different ways to push the harmony and the rhythm even further. It's art music.
Dizzy told me himself, he said, listen, bebop was about integration. We were not trying to be segregated. We always had integrated bands. We were thinking about it, and we wanted to integrate not only with white Americans, but also with all our Latin brothers and sisters. I played with Chano Pozo. I put together these big bands. We were talking about absolute complete integration. That was our goal. And to see somebody that's 28 or 27, the age of my son, my oldest son, out here playing, can play all of this music, can play Monk's music, knows how to play ragtime, understands about music. That's what my father and the musicians wanted. That's what Dizzy and them wanted. And we're all a part of a continuum. That's what George Gershwin wanted. And our continuum is integrated. Our continuum is not segregated. And it's important for us to have our young people be in that line and not get caught in a kind of meaningless, my generation, young people want this and that. People want to do the things that they've always wanted to do.
Colbert's from Charleston, and I know you talked to him. What were your thoughts about the forgiveness the families did, and how that play into his thought?
Something that happens when people get hurt is they build resentment, and they build a sense of barriers with the other people who may have done something for whatever reason. The guy who shot these people, I'm sure he had a mental illness, which brings up issues about how do we treat mental illness, how do we deal with that, how do we address that early. But we were talking about the idea of people coming together and really being ready to do that right now in this generation. There's a very special thing that each person brings to the table that only they can bring to the table. There's never going to be another Winton. There's never going to be another me, another Walter. We all have something special to offer and unique to offer. So we were talking about the concept of people having so much pain, and the way to get the most out of everybody is to figure out how do we love better. You talk about the victims of the shooting who forgave the shooter. How did they have the ability to bring themselves to do that? That deep level of consciousness and love that comes from, it just comes from being on earth and deciding to do that, being willing to do that, like we were talking about on the phone. You have to be willing to love.